only mode.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the November Community IT Innovators webinar. Thank you for joining us today to learn more about Dropbox and whether or not it's the right solution for your organization. This is the 11th and final webinar in 2016, and we thank you all for your support and attendance throughout the year. My name is Johan Hammerstrom, and I'm the President and CEO of Community IT and the moderator for this series. We'd like to share a few webinar tips with you before we begin today. Most importantly, we really want to encourage everyone to interact with us by asking questions using the GoToWebinar chat feature, and we'll do our best throughout the webinar to address and answer your questions. We'd also like to remind you to avoid multitasking during the webinar. You may just miss the best part. If you do happen to miss the best part, if you need to leave the webinar early, if there's any part of the webinar you want to come back and watch again, if you want to share this webinar with other people in your network, we will be posting links to the recording and slides on our website, on our YouTube channel, and on our SlideShare account. And you can find recordings and slides for all previous webinars in those 3 locations. In case you're not familiar with Community IT, our skilled and certified team of IT professionals serves the greater Washington, D.C. nonprofit community, helping organizations of all sizes and capacities to advance their missions through the effective use of technology. We are deeply invested in the nonprofit community. We've worked with over 900 nonprofits since 1993, and we take a strategic and collaborative approach that fits the unique needs and culture of nonprofit organizations. And now it's my pleasure to turn it over to our presenter for today, Steve Longenecker. Steve, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Johan. Thank you. Thank you. So today we're talking about Dropbox for Business. I should right off the bat mention, I think probably most of you all are familiar with this, but Dropbox for Business is one of a number of tiers that Dropbox offers. Many people make use of the free consumer version of Dropbox. I don't know if it's called Dropbox Personal, I believe. It has, by today's standards, somewhat severe limitations on the number of files that you're allowed, the gigabytes of files that you're allowed to store in it. They have a Dropbox Pro tier, which is supposed to be it's supposed to be for individuals who who like Dropbox and want to use it a lot, but are constrained by that free level of the limit of the amount of capacity that you're allowed to have. It also has, the Dropbox Pro tier also has support, which the free version doesn't really have any, like you can't email for support at all. You can only just look at the knowledge base articles that Dropbox has. And then there's the Dropbox for Business tier, which is what we're talking about today. This is aimed at businesses. It includes much greater levels of support, quite a few administrative and security enhancements that aren't available in the Dropbox Pro. It's much more aimed at teams. There's unlimited capacity, which Dropbox Pro has like a terabyte of space, I think, is their limit. But with Dropbox for Business, you really cannot. They start you off with a certain limit, but if you reach that limit, they are happy to expand the limit further for you. There is something called Dropbox for Enterprise or Dropbox Enterprise, something like that, always mentioned in their stuff. I'm not particularly familiar with that. It basically what they talk about that is you need to call us for pricing and call us. It's a much bigger scale than I think our clients work with. I know that with the Dropbox Enterprise, you get like a particular account manager, some of those things that you don't get with Dropbox for Business. You do get phone support, and like I said, so this is what we're talking about today: Dropbox for Business. They refer to themselves as a file sync and share solution. Gartner talks broadly about enterprise file synchronization and sharing. It's basically a way to have my files, and my files, the files that I use or need to use, they're not necessarily just the files that I'm actually the creator of or the owner of, but the files that I need, my files, on all my devices, and I should be able to share them with my colleagues and others, not just my colleagues, but outside people outside my organization as well. So it provides that functionality. Oh, speaking of Gartner, by the way, in this July report, which Dropbox was happy to buy the rights from Gartner to share with their customers, to try to build up business. Gartner listed 4 companies in its top right leaders portion of, they have their magic quadrants, and the top right quadrant is the leaders, the best one to be in, and they listed four vendors in this EFSS space. Those 4 vendors were Citrix, Box, Ignite, and Dropbox. Significantly not in that list are Microsoft and Google. Those 2 companies were in the top left quadrant, which is another really good space to be, but not in the leaders quadrant. That's the challengers quadrant, and that's where Google and Microsoft were the only 2 vendors in that space. So anyway, this is a space that, the industry talks about this file sync and share or enterprise file synchronization and sharing space. So the pitch that Dropbox makes is that, these days everything's different. We all use more than one device. We work from more than one location. We don't just work with our own colleagues, but we work with people outside of our company, and we need to collaborate with all of those people. And so the old solution, which was, I guess, the file server, maybe the file server coupled with some sort of remote access solution like a VPN or a terminal server, that's not going to cut it anymore. That you need Dropbox. This is Dropbox's pitch now. You need Dropbox to sort of respond to these trends, or else you're going to have workers, not being productive as they can be in this new paradigm. So Dropbox says, hey, look, how are you going to solve this problem? You should use Dropbox for Business. Everyone's familiar with it, and that's partly because Dropbox did grow up in that consumer space with the Dropbox Personal that we were talking about. So lots and lots of people have signed up for the free Dropbox Personal tier. I have one that I barely use. It's like, but every once in a while I have some pictures on my phone or something, and I think maybe the easiest way for me to get this to my wife is to use my Dropbox sync, which I do. So I'm familiar with it for that reason, and most of us have probably used the Dropbox Personal, and actually the Dropbox for Business solution is, it's got a lot of enhancements and additions in it, but the basic functionality, the basic experience is the same experience, not just similar, but is really the same. Well, yeah, I mean, there might be some edge cases, but it looks the same, it feels the same. Interestingly, the knowledge base articles are the same. If you are like looking up how to restore, I accidentally deleted a file, how do I restore it? And you look that up in Dropbox, the personal user of Dropbox and the business user of Dropbox read the same knowledge base article. There's not one for business and one for personal. The tool set really at the end of the day are the same. I don't know this for an actual fact. I haven't read this anywhere, but I'm pretty confident. Like, it's all stored in the same data centers, for example. It's all the same. It's just the Dropbox for Business accounts have these additional tools that are very significant and important, as we'll talk about later. But it's the same. So that's a long way of saying that it's familiar. So that's really nice. It's easy to roll this out to our team, our organization, because we've all used Dropbox already. It's platform agnostic. You don't need to. It basically is a syncing. So you're on a Mac, you're on an Android device, you're on an iOS device, or you're on Windows, or even you're on a Linux laptop. The Dropbox application there's one for each of those platforms, and you can use it on each of those platforms, and again get the same functionality. And also, because you're sort of leveraging the sync idea and you're actually interacting with your files for the most part on this device, whether it's a Mac laptop or a Windows desktop or a phone, because you're interacting with it at that space, like all the tools that you use to touch files otherwise, whether you're opening like an Office file or an Adobe file in Photoshop or something, or something else, like you're actually interacting with it through Windows Explorer or or Mac Finder or whatever. So that's another sense that it's agnostic, because once it's synced off of the cloud onto your device interacts with those files just like it would interact with any other device. And finally, this is again, now we're talking about the business tier, because I don't think with the personal, they do talk about security a little bit with like the personal level or the pro level, but for the business, they say, hey, look, we've got simple, basic, good enough security to meet your organization's needs, and so Dropbox for Business is the way you ought to go. This is more of their pitch. This is a slide I took directly out of some material that we're a Dropbox partner, so we have access to their partner resources. And this is you can see that the font's different to join the 200,000 companies that use Dropbox Business. So there was a question in the among the registration questions about how does Dropbox fit into the enterprise, if it does, and I will probably address that question more in slides to come, but I just want to sort of say right here, like, okay, Yahoo, I don't know if that's the best client anymore, but Intuit or Cisco, like, these are big time enterprises, not necessarily the biggest, but they are big enterprises, and it's good. Their IT departments have chosen Dropbox for file sync and sharing needs.
I think it's good to keep in mind, not to contradict you necessarily, Steve, but it's good to keep in mind on those slides that some of those are very large companies, and it could be a small department in the company that's using Dropbox. It could be an IT department that's using it for a very specific use case. So
absolutely,
that's always important to keep in mind whenever you see those
evaluating
sorts of logo splashes.
Right. Fair enough. Yeah, and the same caveat applies here. This is a report from 2014, which is old now, but Forrester, did a nice report all about and it wasn't so much about Dropbox per se. It's in what ways do you or your employees use file sync and share solutions, and there's all these ways that it's being used. They're not saying which ways do your employees use Dropbox. It's file sync and share solutions. So this is sort of, this report's getting at how file syncing and sharing really does enhance productivity. But hey, this was a leadership paper commissioned by Dropbox, so they were. I'm sure Forrester would maintain that they get money from a customer to do a report, and then they are sort of want to do the report in an independent fashion, and that's been done. But at the same time, right from the beginning, what you're exploring, how does file sync and share make us more productive? They could have come back and said it doesn't help at all. It doesn't. It's a waste of money. But they didn't, if that's not a surprise. I do think that to be transparent, this is a Dropbox commissioned work, fine, but also I don't think it's that big a stretch to say, if you're comparing like VPNs, which we I think have lived with at various points in our IT careers probably, but we've all struggled with. They're clunky. It takes time to get the connection up, and then file servers are limited in what they can do. It's, if you're comparing it to that, it's Dropbox for Business. Sure, it helps productivity a lot.
Yeah, and I think these survey results are probably generally applicable to most organizations. So when you're thinking about whether or not to go with Dropbox or another file sharing solution, you can kind of look down this list and say, yeah, I bet, to share files with employees would be kind of the most important thing that my staff would be interested in looking at one of these solutions. So I think these are helpful in building up that business case.
Mm-hmm. So how does it actually work? And I'm not going to spend I'm not going to belabor this. I think most people are familiar with the solution already. The first thing that you do when you get a Dropbox account generally is download the Dropbox app and then install it on your primary device generally. And when you do, it creates a Dropbox folder. And I put in hard drive in quotes because, you know, these days not all these file storage components of our computers are hard drives anymore. But, you know, whether it's a solid state drive, you know, if your primary device is the phone, you know, it's not a hard drive. But anyway, so you have this Dropbox folder. So I'm a Windows user, so for me it's a Windows folder that would show up in Windows Explorer, but the same is true if you're in iOS. You see a new folder called your Dropbox folder, and it behaves the same with your sort of folder management operating system that any other folder does. You can drag files and folders into it, you can drag them out, you can delete, you can create, you can save to it, so forth. Whatever you put in that folder, that special Dropbox folder, is syncing to the Dropbox cloud, and it's doing this basically whenever your device is online, and whenever any of those files that are in that folder change and you're online, they get synced to the Dropbox cloud, where you have you know, your account's copy of that folder, and that's it in a nutshell. And Dropbox says about Dropbox for Business and their marketing material, you know, it just works, which I think they've stole that line from somewhere else, but in truth it does. There was another question in the registration questions about how does, you know, the Dropbox for Business synchronization compare to OneDrive for Business's synchronization, and the questioner said, you know, we had OneDrive for Business and really struggled with this sync tool, like it was always needing to be reset and stuff. And yeah, I'd say that our sort of experience in the field is that there's not a better syncing tool out there. I mean, it is what they made their, you know, money on and continue to make their money on, is that sync tool. You know, bulletproof is probably too strong. They do have knowledge base articles called things like "What happens when the sync doesn't work?" and so they basically give the same advice that every sync tool I've ever seen advises, which is, you know, uninstall it and reinstall it. But it's just not a complaint that comes up that often. It really does just work. So now you can log on to Dropbox.com with your account, and you can see the cloud version of your synced files and folders. You can install the Dropbox app on your other devices and sync those as well. They do have Selective Sync. So if you've got your laptop has all your files on it, and everything on your in the Dropbox folder on your laptop is being synced to your Dropbox cloud, but then you install the Dropbox app on your phone, and you don't want your phone doesn't have nearly the capacity, and on your phone you don't want all of the files synced to your phone. So in your phone app, you would do some, you know, configuration, and you would select, you know, just this folder or just that folder, and only, you know, a small subset of the files that are in your Dropbox cloud, you know, if that's the authoritative version, only a small subset are being synced to your phone. And that's important because that's one of the sort of large-scale issues with this sort of sync model, is that syncing requires capacity on your devices for the space to store those copies, because in fact, again, mostly what you're operating off of is the local copy that is being synced back to the cloud. Then you can share your files and your folders with others, either from your people who are in your Dropbox for Business account, and if it's other colleagues who are also members of the Dropbox Business account, it may be that you have like team folders where it's automatically shared with certain colleagues based on the groupings the permissions that are set up and the sharing is established for different folders. But if you're the owner of a folder and you want to share that folder with two of your colleagues and uh, one outside vendor, you just put in the email addresses of those people and you can share that folder with them. There's two kinds of folders: collaborative sharing and one-way sharing. That's their terminology. I don't think I would name it that way. And I think anybody who's used any of these kinds of services would be familiar with the concepts, if not those names for them. Collaborative sharing is kind of traditional, what I was just talking about, where you put their email addresses in, and then at that point they get an email saying, hey, this folder's been shared with you. If they already have a Dropbox account, they're good to go. They just see it in their Dropbox account or folder as shared with me or something along those lines. And that it's going to sync to their Dropbox folder, this stuff that's been shared with them, assuming that they accept the invitation, so to speak. And then at that point, if they start modifying, deleting, any of those, assuming that that's what the permissions have been given to them with sort of the full range of edit permissions, they can edit that stuff. And if they do, when they are editing their local synced copy, when they're done editing and close, or even while they're editing, as they're editing and not closing, but as they're editing and saving, those changes are being synced back to your authoritative cloud version and then synced back to you. So that's collaborative sharing. One-way sharing is basically share links, read-only share links. So you don't, you're not sharing the actual file with them. What you're doing is sharing, well, I don't know if you, anyway, they get a link, and when they click on the link, if it's like a Word document, they might be able to see a preview of it in a browser, or a PDF. They would be able to see a preview of it in a browser, but they can't edit it. They can download a copy of it. You can set an expiration date on that share link, so you can say, here's the share link, and you can set an automatic expire in 1 week so that it's not going to go on forever. You can remove the link if you've changed your mind, immediately after sending it. You can remove the link, and in that case, when the person you sent it to, or if clicks on it, they would get a page not found error. The links are anonymous, so someone who gets a link from you could, assuming that it's not expired yet, could forward that link to someone else. It can be passed around. It's anonymous, and it's also live. So if you send a link to someone for a file and they don't, they click on it to preview it, look at it, close it, and then meanwhile you change the file, you edit it and move some paragraphs around and stuff. If they click on it again, they'll see the changes that you've made, but they're still not able to edit it themselves, and the most that they can do is download a copy. So those are the two kinds of sharing. And that's it, how it works in a nutshell. Again, the sort of the take-home message is it's all based on a lot of syncing back and forth to the cloud. So whenever there are ways to operate on Dropbox files directly from the cloud, but the whole setup is designed for operating on a local copy that's constantly being synced with the cloud. So as you make changes and save those changes to your local hard drive or solid state drive or whatever, it's being synced to the cloud. And if other people also are sharing that, they can they then will sync down the new versions as long as they're online. Does that make sense to you, Johan? No one else can talk, but
it does make sense. And actually, we have a few questions that might actually help. That I think might now be a good time. So and they're all kind of related to interface. I think you're talking about the interface that people use to access their files, from Dropbox. So one question is, some services like Office 365 OneDrive or Google Drive apps include applications for creating, launching commonly used document formats directly from the storage interface. So you go into your OneDrive on the web and there's a new button, and you can like say new Word document, for example.
Hmm. Hmm.
Is that something that Dropbox supports?
So there is a Dropbox like document editor. Um, our reports from our field experiences are that it's a little flaky. Um, I mean, it's probably analogous to sort of Google Docs. Like it's not nearly as full featured as, Word Online, the Office 365 browser version of Word. But even that, even more than Google Docs, like it doesn't always, like it can't open all Word documents, and there doesn't seem to be a rhyme or reason that we've just detected on why it can't. Um, and if you are a Microsoft Office 365 subscriber and therefore have Word Online through that, you can then interact with Dropbox. You know, there's an agreement between Dropbox and Microsoft that they're sort of supporting each other. We don't really have any clients who would want to pay for Dropbox and want to have like, well, that's not true, but it's kind of a funny combination to have the Word Online and Dropbox, because it does seem like once you're going down the Word Online uh, direction, you'd probably want to just use OneDrive for Business or the team sites from SharePoint. But there is that possibility. But again, I guess what I want to emphasize is like our experience of Dropbox is that it's designed and supposed to be working off the local copy.
Uh-huh.
Like it really doesn't work as well when you're trying to operate off the cloud version, off the
Yeah.
browser version.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question, which is there was at one time, especially to some fanfare, this integration between Dropbox partnership almost between Dropbox and Microsoft on Office 365, where if you open up a Microsoft Office application on your desktop, like Word or Excel, and you go to kind of like, online locations, one of the ones that you could add was Dropbox. That's certainly still supported on the tablet. Um, but it did seem like that sort of they added it and then never really built on it, or
Yeah.
then it seemed like almost as soon as Microsoft sort of announced that, then they started building out Office 365 in earnest, and so that
Yep.
partnership was kind of left out in the cold.
I think it's still officially there, but it's just not gotten a lot of attention.
Yeah.
I mean, another example would be like our experience again from the field is like if you choose to rearrange sort of your folders kind of on a massive scale, not like I'm going to move these 3 files from this folder to that folder, but like I want to move this folder and its subfolders and sub-subfolders and sub-sub. I mean, we're talking about levels and whatever. And I'm going to move it from this root to that root, and it's like it's a big deal. Something that on a file server, I mean, wouldn't be that a big a deal. You'd potentially break a bunch of like shortcuts and hyperlinks, but otherwise, like it would just happen sort of instantly on a file server. Um, so if you try to do that in the cloud, if it's this, as soon as it gets above some sort of certain like not undocumented, we don't know what it is, but there seems to be some limit out there. It just can't do it. It just sort of says can't complete this you know move, this folder move. That's if you're doing it in the browser. So what are you supposed to do? Well, you go to your Dropbox folder on your computer, where it's again you're operating in Windows Explorer or Mac OS Finder at that point. Move the folders around there. It works perfectly. It syncs perfectly. It all can be done, but the best way to interact with it is at the at the at the synced local copy level, and then allow the amazing, truly, I mean, let's not, I mean,
Hmm.
amazing Dropbox sync service to get the thing all synced up.
Yeah, and I think that's the fundamental take home, which is Dropbox was kind of built from the sync out, and so the
Yep.
sync works amazing, and web-based access not quite as amazing, and
Nope.
other solutions
Web-based
like
access is kind of tacked on,
yeah,
and exactly. Whereas SharePoint
other
and
way around.
OneDrive is really just a small like stepchild of. I mean, I shouldn't say it that way, but SharePoint's kind of built on. I mean, OneDrive is built on SharePoint very clearly. SharePoint's like we're a cloud solution, and then they kind of looked around and said Dropbox is eating a significant part of the market because people want to work with the familiar tools of their operating systems, folder and file tools. We better add some sync tools, and not that we did, but we better invest in some sync tools, and they have invested in sync. So Microsoft has a new edition, a new version of their sync tool that's supposed to be much better, and I can't say from experience one way or the other about that. I mean, I believe that it's much better, but I haven't really worked with it enough. It just came out a couple months ago. But that came second.
Mhm.
So like they're oriented around the browser in Microsoft's platform. Dropbox oriented around sync, and again the browser tools are kind of there because they need to be, but that's not where the rubber meets the road.
Yeah. One other quick question, and I don't want to derail your presentation. Really quickly, if you have with Dropbox, you have one folder on your computer that is the Dropbox folder that's synchronized. Can you share files from other folders, other directories on your computer that aren't in that Dropbox folder?
No,
You have to move it into that folder.
you move it into that folder. Yep,
Yeah. Okay.
yep.
Great.
That's the folder where the magic happens, and that is uh, that's a not in. I mean, the person who asked that was getting at something. Yep. I mean, it's kind of a big. You kind of like hit your wagon to Dropbox, right? I mean, you can have multiple services, but unless you have clear demarcations of why Dropbox is for this function and whatever, OneDrive for Business is for that function. It you kind of like you're going to. I mean, from Dropbox's perspective, look, you're gonna be a Dropbox customer. You get the Dropbox business. You're paying us this monthly fee. Your whole organization's in this. Basically, all of your documents should be in your Dropbox folder at that point. Even the ones that you're not sharing should be there so that they are synced to the cloud, so that you can always get them on your other devices, etc. There really shouldn't be anything else. Now, if you're operating at a Dropbox personal level like I am, then I barely use Dropbox. It's just for a few, now and then thing. And so my Dropbox personal folder on my laptop is essentially empty except for a few pictures again, and a receipt here and there from personal life. But that's because I'm not all in.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you put it well. Hitch their start of their wagon. Uh, that can create a host of problems, especially if you have as an organization, especially if you have a large number of files or very large files. And I think you
Yep.
address that later
Yep.
in the presentation.
All right. So let's keep moving. Personal versus business. So there is potentially something going on, and Dropbox certainly is aware of the fact that they built their whole empire on the personal consumer grade things, and now they're adding this business because it's the businesses that actually have money to pay them every month. So they have to sort of separate them, but also they want to keep them. They want to keep both alive and well. So basically, the way they've solved this problem is that every account has to have a separate email address. You can, though, let's say that if I'm a user and I have my personal Dropbox account and I like it, I don't want to give it up. But I also now, my organization, my business is getting Dropbox for Business. But I only have one Dropbox app that runs on my laptop, and I've been enjoying the Dropbox app for my personal use, and now my company is telling me I need to have Dropbox for Business, so how do I do it? So they can have, the app can basically have both accounts linked together. So I don't think you can do more than two, but you can definitely do two. And so when you look at the app interface, you'll see personal and you'll see business, and there'll actually be two separate folders, and they're not mixed together. And I can, just for illustrative purposes here, talk about some of the ways that this is actually separated. So for example, Dropbox for Business provides a lot of power to administrators, and they need to. I mean, that's a requirement of a sort of a business need. So one of the things that a Dropbox for Business administrator can do is they can basically log on as an end user and basically log into their cloud account, so to speak. And this might be the kind of thing that you would do if an employee were terminated, for example, or I don't know, an employee suddenly was in the hospital and really incapacitated, but you needed to get to their stuff. You might log in as them, and that's great functionality. When you log in as them, you do not see their personal files and cannot see their personal files. Like, they are separate. It's just that the app is managing both. Um, now, another sticky thing that's definitely happened for us with some of our own clients, our own customers, frequently people are using Dropbox, the personal tier of Dropbox, for business purposes. So, you know, I'm an employee at a very, very small nonprofit, and I need to be able to share files with my home computer, and I need to be able to share files with, you know, this partner organization. And so what am I going to do? I don't know. Well, you know what? I know about Dropbox. I'm going to sign up for a free Dropbox account with my organization's email address, my not my personal email address, but my business email address, because after all, I'm using it for business purposes. I'm not using a credit card. I'm not paying any money. It's fine. And so here I am working away. This is basically shadow IT. And now the organization that I work for actually buys Dropbox for Business. So the community IT technician comes around and says, okay, we're setting up your Dropbox for Business account, but then when they try to set it up for you, it turns out that there's already a Dropbox Personal account in that email address. Under that email address. What are we going to do? So there's two choices, and they're both completely supported by Dropbox. One is that basically all those files that already exist in that at that personal tier are just basically upgraded into the Dropbox for Business. So they just come right on up, and you're now using Dropbox for Business. You get all the advantages of Dropbox for Business, but all the files are still there. And if by chance some of those are personal, maybe you just leave them there and live with it, or maybe you move them out if you want to. It depends on sort of how, what the acceptable use policy is for, IT services and so forth and so on. The other option is that you're given is if it's mostly personal, you just happen to use a business email address for it, is that when you do that sort of account creation, you're given the option of reassociating your personal account with a different email address, a Gmail address or something like that. So that's how they sort of solve the fact that there's, personal Dropbox use as well as business Dropbox use. Then,
so, I'm sorry,
yeah.
Steve. I was a little late on my unmute. Couple great questions that I wanted to run by you, and if you're about to answer them, then we can hold off. But great question on if you're an organization and you let's say you're a 10-person nonprofit, you have Dropbox for Business, you have a pretty large number of files, and you want to share that with an independent consultant who has Dropbox Personal. When you go to share that folder with them, are they gonna reach their personal limit and kind of run out of space if you're sharing your business folder with them?
So this is a great question, and it's definitely on my agenda to address it, and it wasn't going to be now, but I'm happy to do it now. There's not any particular reason not to. Yes, that is a big fly in the ointment as far as I'm concerned. My wife is a business partner with someone who has a Dropbox Pro account with the 1 terabyte limit, and they're really scrounging in their little IT world, and I just have to shake my head sometimes as the sometime IT consultant, but that exactly happens all the time. Her business partner shares, big folders with her, and immediately her little free Dropbox thing is at capacity, and she can't do anything more with it. So if you're going to be sharing files with people who are outside of your Dropbox business organization, which of course you will be, you need to be judicious in that. You don't want to share like the main folder that has 500 gigabytes of data in it. The personal account limit, I don't remember what it is, but it might be 5, it might be 10 gigabytes, might be 20, but it's small, and they can't do that. So you need to share individual files or small folders, but otherwise, absolutely. So there was another question in the registration, about that very specific question about we'd like to be able to share, files or folders with board members. How does that work? So if you put in an email address, if you click on the folder and say right-click in the Dropbox app, so you right-click on, you've installed the Dropbox app. So now when you right-click on a folder within the Dropbox folder, you'll see a little, a Dropbox contextual menu will be there. You choose drop, and it's one of your choices is share, and you tick share, and then it pops up. It asks basically for some email addresses, or that you also have the public link option, which we talked about before, which is the one-way sharing. So if you put in someone's email address in that, they're going to get an email that says, you've been invited to share this Dropbox folder. So step one, they have to have a Dropbox account associated with that email address. There's no other way to access these folders. They don't have to install the Dropbox app, but they have to be able to log into Dropbox with that email address, not some other email address, that email address. So right off the bat, you've sort of created a little bit of some friction there for someone maybe who doesn't have a Dropbox personal account. So that's step one. It's pretty easy to get a free Dropbox personal account, but it's something. And the same thing happens with OneDrive for Business and SharePoint. If you're sharing with external users, Microsoft basically is saying, yeah, you need to register with us. I haven't really read much about how Dropbox then starts peppering you with spam. Certainly, I hope, I can't say one or the other, but I hope and haven't heard that they're like responsible for selling your email address to other people. I don't think any of that happens. But they do have you have to register for that, for at least the personal level of the Dropbox, and then yes, those gigabytes count against their relatively small limit if they're still going with the free level. So that's a long answer to a great question. I was going to address that.
While we're on a roll with the great questions, got another one.
All right.
Do you know of any administrative solution? Can you, on the back end with Dropbox for Business, provision Selective Sync so that when you set up Dropbox for the first time for a new person in your organization, they're not automatically by default syncing all of the folders? Or can you even restrict it?
So I'm not quite sure about that. I so first of all, not everything that's in the company's Dropbox account is shared with everybody, obviously. But there is like the main team folder, which is supposed to be shared with everybody. And I'm not aware of a way on the back end to say, like, this is not synced with everybody. There's another feature, and I must say, one of the criticisms that I had of Dropbox at one time was kind of like that they really were a consumer company. And actually, this criticism still kind of holds, that they're still a consumer company. I believe that. At the same time, I have been impressed with their development of their enterprise product. I have somewhere later to talk about the Dropbox badge, but I might as well talk about it now. So Dropbox badge, when you install the Dropbox app, and you have, this is a couple things that have to be true, and you have Office 2013 or Office 2016, and you open a file from the Dropbox folder, and it's a docx or XLXX. In other words, it's the new and improved file extension, and I apologize to Mac users, but whatever, you know what I'm talking about. It's not the old versions of the Office documents. Anyway, when all those things are true, and for most of us who are staying with the times, it's not hard to be true for those things. Like, it's pretty basic at this point to have at least Office 2013, and pretty much everybody is using the modern versions of the documents. But when it's true, and you're working in Microsoft Word or whatever, there's a little Dropbox badge off to the right, and it's a little intrusive, but not a lot. Although there's a lot of, if you Google it, there's a lot of like, how do I get rid of that? In fact, it's very easy to hide it if you want to, but it does things like tell you if somebody else is editing their synced copy at the same time, and it allows you to make comments. And there's a lot of like enterprise grade features, and this came out, I don't know, in the last 6 months, I think. Maybe it's longer ago than that, but anyway, they are developing. Another thing that's coming soon, apparently, and the reason I thought of it was because of the question about Selective Sync. Coming soon is I think they called it Project Infinity, and probably by the time it comes out, it will have a different name. But this idea that when you sync, your Dropbox folder everything will appear to be there as you click through, but it won't actually be synced. I don't know. I mean, the details have to be worked out. But Dropbox is well aware of the challenge here that right now all Selective Sync does is allow you to not sync a folder or file, but sync a folder. But then if you choose not to sync it, it's just not there. Like you don't see it in that particular device's local copy. Another device, you may choose to sync it, and then it will be there. But with this Project Infinity, you would still see it. So you could still like click down through a bunch of folders, even though those folders aren't synced. In other words, the technical thing they'd be doing is they're syncing like the object without the actual data of the object, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can sync it. So this is coming. So Dropbox is definitely investing in their enterprise or business grade product offering and making it better and better. But in terms of the original question that prompted this long segue, I don't think there's a way to do the selective sync on the back end, and it is a problem right now. Like there is a certain amount of sort of self-management that people have to do to figure out what they're going to sync and what they're not going to sync.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully, it works well enough right now, and then there's this promise of this new and improved thing coming soon. Although, which is interesting, like it's getting more and more cloud-like in the sense that it works better when you're actually connected. It doesn't work as well when you're not, that kind of a thing.
Yeah. Well, I guess it kind of, and I apologize. I know we're running out of time, and I keep derailing you with these really great questions. And I do want to thank everyone for submitting these great questions. I think if there's a simple answer to any question you have about Dropbox, it's probably like it all starts with sync, and then as you peel out from there, it all starts with personal sync, and as you peel out from there, it works to varying degrees of effectiveness.
So let's roll through some of these things.
Yes,
definitely they tacked on a bunch of, and I don't mean to make it sound like it's haphazard. I actually like one of the selling points from their perspective of their features, of their security feature set, is that it really is simple, and that simple can actually be better because it's easier to administer, it's easy to design. Like, you can sort of be, I don't know, that you guys are a technical audience, I assume, to some extent. Like if you think about Microsoft sometimes, like how not simple it is. And so like they give you like this great tool set like group policy, and you can like do anything with it. But then you also run the risk of making these incredibly elaborate and complex and like always breaking things, because you can do anything and you try to, and it's like keeping it very simple and clean has a lot of value. I think that's what Google has tried to do, sort of their enterprise product set, as compared to, as a alternative to Microsoft. But yeah, so they have all all this stuff it's actually pretty. There's not a lot of things in some ways, not nearly as many bells and whistles as you'd find elsewhere, but the basics are here. So you can audit, who's sharing what with what. You can definitely on the back end, like as an administrator, say this folder cannot be shared outside of the organization. No public links allowed for this folder, and that's that. You can. This is an important thing because we'll talk about this more as the security slides keep coming. But the data, your files in the cloud on Dropbox's servers, those files are encrypted, and they're not just encrypted. It's like, the encryption is separate from like the user information. The permission structures are also encrypted, but they're somewhere else. I mean, it's all all very well done, and it's encrypted in transit. So as you're syncing information with the Dropbox servers to your local device, that traffic, if it's intercepted, is just gobbledygook to whoever intercepts it. But on your actual laptop, say, it's just there. You can open your laptop. If you can get into it, you can see that information. So remote wipe is obviously very important. If a device is lost, you can quickly say, hey, I want all the Dropbox information to be wiped the next time it comes online. Of course, it has to come online, but that functionality is built into the Dropbox for Business feature set. We talked about encryption just a moment ago. Single sign-on is possible. This is useful and an important part of security because, of course, as there's so many different services and passwords that users have to maintain, that proliferation of credentials means that people are more apt to write them down or put the sticky notes on their monitors or whatever. So if you can simplify life for your users by saying you're going to have one really hard password to remember, or not hard to remember, but one complicated password that's easy to remember because it's going to be some sort of mnemonic device, but only one, and you change it every 3 months, but that one set of credentials get you into all of our other services. Dropbox can be one of those many services because they have partners with single sign-on providers. Someone asked who we recommended of the many SSO partners. Dropbox lists 12 or 13 partners that they work with for single sign-on. The ones that we're probably most likely to recommend to our clients would be OneLogin, Okta, and then they don't list Azure Active Directory actually among their third-party identity providers, but I know that it can be done with Azure Active Directory. I mean, I've seen the KB article on how to do it. We've not set it up for anybody, but because of Microsoft's generosity with nonprofits for providing Azure services and Office 365 services, certainly if I were going to be using Microsoft and I would consider that it would work. And then there's also two-factor authentication, and that's a crucial part of enhancing the risk that someone might gain access to your files. There were some questions here that we came in pre-registration about some of these things, security in particular. I wanted to mention the fact that that there's a link. I don't know if you can chat it out, Johan, but there's a link to a transparency page or blog. So yeah, one of the risks that some of our clients and some of you might be concerned about is, what about super double secret subpoenas or whatever from the government? Dropbox would comply with them and would be able to comply with them, but they have their philosophy. They're very public about it. They on that transparency page, I say how many subpoenas they've gotten, what they've done in each case. Not in each case, they're not allowed to identify the individual cases, but what they've done numbers wise. We had 20 subpoenas last quarter, and 10 of them we did this, did that, whatever. So I mean, I think that's a concern with any cloud service that you know, Dropbox does have the ability to give up the data if they want to. I mean, not if they want to. If they have the technical ability, and so if they're compelled to by the government, they would. And then and potentially under some of the, I'm not a lawyer, but my understanding is, there are certain statutes that allow that subpoena process to happen without your knowledge, and without Dropbox being able to 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 advise you of it. Normally, if it's a normal subpoena, they would tell you, and they might even like, I think that I read somewhere in preparation for this webinar that like the subpoena might say, you need to give us this information, and they might email you and say, or call you, whatever, but we have been given this subpoena and we are giving them access to these files, tomorrow. So that gives you maybe a day to, it depends on the subpoena. People wanted to know about the encryption options with Dropbox, and I talked about the fact that it's, again, encrypted at rest, meaning encrypted on the Dropbox server. It's encrypted in transit, meaning that if it's intercepted, there's nothing to be done with it, but it's not necessarily encrypted. It's not encrypted on your device. There is that remote wipe thing, but that's not foolproof. It doesn't come online. So if you really are concerned about that, I think you'd have to consider some sort of like certificate-based encryption thing on top of that. I know that Dropbox does have a partner service called Boxcryptor, and we haven't implemented ourselves at Community IT with anyone, so I can only talk about what I've read about it. It looks pretty cool, but it's one of these situations where there's certificates being passed around. It certainly would add a lot of hurdles to sort of that sharing thing, and possibly a lot of administration and management of it. But if depending on your requirements, that might be something to do. Question about how reliable Dropbox is. This is significant, I think. There's not actually a service level agreement. They don't promise any nines. It's sold, and if you read their terms of agreement or whatever, it says that the service is provided as is. There is a link, and we can maybe chat it out, where they list sort of all of their incidents. And I was looking at it, and it looks like, 1 to 2 incidents a month. There was a period of 3 months last winter where there were no incidents for 3 straight months, but then there might be, I never saw a month that had more than 3. And most of them were 1, 2, none, sort of bouncing around in that area. And I'm imagining that each incident is on the order of an hour or 2. And significantly, if if Dropbox is down, so to speak, it just means you don't have at that point any syncing going on. Your local copy of the files is still there on your device, but that's all. And then the last question was about backups. Johan and I were discussing this right before the webinar. That's really a cost benefit question. We start getting kind of conservative when we talk about backups, because like, well, what happens if Dropbox has a massive failure? Then what are you going to do? I mean, Dropbox, with Dropbox for Business, it's like for Dropbox Pro, I think it's 30 days. After that, if you delete something 30 days later, you can't get it back. Dropbox Business, they promise never. You will always be able to restore a file, no matter how long ago you deleted it. They also offer you the option of rolling back like the entire business account to 2 days ago at noon. And this would be important if and someone who has a lot of access to most of the folders got a crypto locker virus, and all of them were encrypted, and that encryption synced up to the Dropbox cloud and then synced down to everybody else, and so then everybody's files are encrypted. What do? Well, you call Dropbox and you say, roll the whole dang thing back to yesterday before this happened, and they can do that. So there's a lot built into the service that's pretty cool, and I really appreciate and think is pretty great. But yeah, what if Dropbox has a massive failure? Maybe you should have backups, a third-party backup, and there is different ways to do that. You could just on your own, copy everything in your Dropbox folder to an external hard drive once every 2 months, and sort of have this very low-level, low-tech kind of disaster type, insurance sort of, you know, if there was some service that you could have that was only $10 a month, that sounds great. If it was $1,000 a month, that probably is too expensive. It's a cost benefit thing. Speaking of costs, it is a subscription model. Someone asked if there's a free version for nonprofits. There is not. There is a discount for nonprofits. It's a 30% discount, so the retail price is $15 per user per month. So a 30% discount puts that at right around $10.50 a month, which is a significant discount, but it's not, free. If you have Office 365, you can get that for free as a nonprofit, and then at that point, the OneDrive for business and SharePoint file collaboration sharing type services come along at no additional cost. Oh, the other thing about this pricing is that it is a 5-user minimum for Dropbox for Business. I mean, you don't have to have 5 more than you have to. If you can have 3 users, but you're going to have to pay for 5, and you need to buy it from a reseller, and we are a reseller, so I'm not trying to, but we are a reseller, we are able to, and do. Our customers are getting that $10.50 per month thing because we are able to do that. What do our clients say about it? I actually got, it was cool. I emailed the clients that have Dropbox for Business, and they all of them got back to me. So that's already says something kind of nice about. I think it says something nice about Dropbox. Maybe it says something nice about those clients too. But anyway, thank you to those clients. Universally, people said it was a good solution and that they would recommend it. A couple of them really appreciated the file history recovery function, where people do delete things or mess things up, and being able to roll back has been a lifesaver for a couple of our clients. People emphasize the need for user training, and it's interesting because Dropbox touts the fact that it's a very familiar thing because we're all used to the personal use. But I think what people are getting at here is that the personal version of Dropbox is mostly about syncing my files that truly are my files among my devices, and maybe a little bit of sharing, but not necessarily a lot. Like maybe just maybe your soccer team has a schedule file that they share or something, but not a ton of that. And so if you're going to start using Dropbox for Business, where really there's a lot of collaboration going on, some training around how to do that and sort of establish some best practices. One client mentioned the fact that like if there's a team folder and you just drop a huge video file into it, well, that's going to cause 5 gigs of synchronization to happen to every single computer. That's a pain. Like that, you got to be careful about that kind of a thing. So anyway, that's feedback from our clients. I'm sort of racing, and I apologize for that, but I'm aware that we're at time already. Some of our own experiences, you can't rename root folders without unsharing and resharing them. So you can do that at the subfolder level, but if you've shared a folder, that folder name that you share it with is the name it has to keep. So if you share a board folder and then you realize later you want it to be board of directors, you have to unshare it first and then reshare it. So you got to have this thing planned out a little bit of design ahead of time is important. You can't share at different levels of the folder hierarchy, which is quite different than the way a file server works. So someone asked about sort of what is it, how should you organize Dropbox for Business in terms of how it's organized, and there is potentially some scale issues here, and that back to Johan's caution about all these enterprises, like are they using it across the board, or are they just using it for small projects? This might be a place where the across the enterprise does have some challenges. Basically, for every different permutation of permissions that you want to have, that's established at the root folder. So if I have back to my board of directors example, if I share that with the board of directors and inside that is a finance folder that's just for the finance committee, I can't do that. I have to take that finance folder, pull it out of the board of directors folder, make it a separate root folder, and share that finance folder with the finance committee. You can't sort of do new sharing levels within a hierarchy. Folder ownership is different than admin permissions, so this is getting kind of esoteric, and maybe I shouldn't even really try to explain it right now, but there is some technical things that we've learned um, about some of the differences between these things called ownership and admin. And if anybody wants to know more about that, they can contact me, but I won't talk about it now. And then the last thing is that the migration relies on sync. This has been a sort of a surprise to us that there's not like an like an FTP service or some way of, like, let's say you have a 400 gigs of data on your file server and you want to get it all into a team folder initially. And then at that point, you're going to start syncing individual clients. But at first, you just want to get it off the file server and do it as quickly and efficiently as possible. The way to do that is to set up a user account on the file server. Then you have an empty Dropbox for Business folder created when you install the app on the file server. That folder is associated with the admin account, and at that point you drag your shares from your file server into that Dropbox for Business folder and wait for it to sync. It's not the cleanest migration, and we basically have told our clients that they can't use those shares until the sync is done, because otherwise our fear is that there's going to be corruption and conflicts if people are working on this stuff while the stuff's actually syncing. We've really addressed this a lot, sync versus cloud. It does work really well with folders because you're working on local copies, so a forklift migration is possible. It does require bandwidth. We talked about dropping the really big file into the shared folder and all that syncing that goes on that. It can lead to version conflicts. The badge thing helps with this, but if you think about the fact that it's possible for two people to work on a local copy at the same time, they both are saving it at the same time, it's gonna sync. It will create two actual different names, so you can sort it out, but it's not the same thing as co-authoring. If you're using a sort of a pure browser or cloud experience like SharePoint, it's very different and not as, it's more limited. You don't have the ability to have two people working on a document and actually having their changes both be saved to the same single authoritative version that's in the cloud. Our instinct is that the cloud is the future. So in some ways, I think Dropbox is, it's hitched its wagon to technology that's probably in the long run not going to be the way everybody goes, but it could have a nice run in the meantime, and you could have a nice run using Dropbox for Business in the meantime. I don't want to discourage Dropbox at all. I'm just, the long term, I think, is a cloud, pure cloud. Dropbox for Business versus SharePoint and OneDrive for Business. The SharePoint OneDrive thing, that's part of Office 365, so we already talked about the pricing of it. One thing about using Office 365 is that Microsoft's making a big bet on machine learning, and they have this Office graph. We continue to be impressed with Office 365's Delve is the part of the suite that it's called. But basically, they're surfacing files that they think you want to see or want to work on based on kind of what your coworkers are working on, your relationships that it's figured out about you from, I don't have time to talk about it too much, but if you're going to use, the more you use a cloud service as compared to a sync service, the more option there is to use for the cloud service to sort of see patterns and use those patterns to make the service work better. I think the SharePoint and OneDrive integrates better with the rest of the Microsoft stack. SharePoint has more sophisticated enterprise controls. Dropbox is not complicated. That last point, though, could be a positive or a negative, depending on kind of what your requirements are. Our summary is that it's a good solution, and we definitely support it, and we recommend it to clients that are looking, that definitely want more functionality than a basic file server can provide. that aren't heavily invested in the Microsoft stack. Even if they have, like just email services through Office 365, they're not really doing much else with it. They don't want to invest in like the whole SharePoint paradigm with metadata and all of that. They like their file structure already. They've got a good folder hierarchy and things are organized well, and they want to keep all that. Um, that I think Dropbox for Businesses can be a really good solution in those cases, and we do recommend it to clients, and the clients that have used it have liked it. Um, there's a lot I didn't cover. I I thought this was going to be a short webinar, but I think I should stop. Um, Unless Johan, you want to push a little bit further with questions. I mean, I know we didn't talk about you know data loss prevention and stuff. Some of the things that Dropbox doesn't do are some of those more sophisticated things.
Yeah, I think actually, and there are a lot of questions that we didn't get to, and I think maybe we might consider doing a part two follow-up to this because I think there are there's a lot of interest in Dropbox and a lot of topics that we didn't get to cover. So um, we're unfortunately out of time, but
Yeah, I
we have
do
a
have a
list of all
blog.
the questions.
I do have a blog post coming, or is it out? I don't. You tell me.
I think it's out now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's on our website. I think
Okay.
it's the most recent
So
blog
some of the
post.
lessons from the field are there. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So we could do a part two. I'd be open to that. Depending, we can look at the questions.
Yep. Great. Well, thank you so much, Steve. Let's see. I think we've got the closing slide. Yes. So no webinar in December, unless we decide to do this part two Dropbox webinar. Maybe we'll do that in December. We will let you know by email if that's the case. But our next planned webinar is going to be in January. So join us January. We'll be releasing the topic in early January. We'll let you know what that is. And you'll get a survey at the end, and we appreciate the time you take to fill that out and do our best to incorporate your feedback. If you missed anything, the link and the recording, the slides and the recording will be posted on our YouTube and SlideShare accounts, and we will email the link out to you, and it will also be available on our website. So thank you very much for joining us today, and we wish you all the best for the rest of 2016 and look forward to your joining us in 2017. Thank you very much and take care.
Thank you.